Thank you, Dr. Fluker, for that introduction, and I need to shorten that bio. And thank you for the invitation to return back to Brite. I think this is my second time being back after leaving in 2019, so it's good to be back, and I don't take the invitation for granted. So thank you so much. And thank you, Steph, for that wonderful ministry of music. That was certainly a blessing. And Andre has put the pressure on because he said in his prayer that Dr. Fluker brings excellent speakers every week. So I'm going to do my best to hold that up. So this morning's text, in context, is really verses 6 through 8, but I'll really just touch on verse 8. And I think the way in which I want to enter into this text is also to translate that when we say love, that we say do justice and to love kindness and walk humbly with our God, better translated to walk wisely with our God. And so lift me up, hold me down is not original with me. If you follow any type of music, you know this comes from Rihanna's song, Lift Me Up. But I thought it was very apropos to talk about on today when we talk about what does it mean to have prophetic ministry and how that looks in everyday life. Have you ever needed someone to lift you up and hold you down? And from personal experience, I can say life, as it has its moments, will have you looking at someone and saying, I need you to lift me up. Be my advocate when I don't have the capacity or the will to do so for myself. I may ask you to hold me down, to have my back, to protect me and to support me when I can't do it for myself. In the book of Micah, we find people who need someone to lift them up and hold them down. And as the prophet comes on the scene in the 8th century, he did not waste any time listing the transgressions of the people of God, those in Israel and those in Judah. And in his book, The Prophets, Abraham Heschel suggests that Micah is saying that the fatal sin is the sin of moral corruption. He directs his rebuke particularly against the heads of the house of Jacob and the rulers of the house of Israel who abhor justice and perverts equity. As a consequence, he stands as a prophet relentlessly predicting disaster and disgrace for leaders and a nation, maintaining that her wound is incurable and that the Lord is devising evil against the people in chapter 1. And Carol Dempsey also further suggests that Micah clarifies that Israel's God will not tolerate injustice rooted in and flowing from apostasy, idolatry, hypocrisy, and a disregard for the Torah and a break in covenant relationship. Divine justice would be imposed. Micah lays out the case for the wrongdoings in chapters 2 and 3. He calls out the religious rulers and political leaders, those in power who hold authority because they have stolen land. They have engaged in acts of violence, robbery, corruption, greed, land grabbing, while creating poverty. Sounds a lot like 2023 to me. Micah's justice seeking and truth telling about the context of his social and political reality, and his message transcends time. It is universal. We have a political economy tilted to the advantage of those who have plenty at the expense of those who are materially poor. Florida continues its assault on truth-telling, and come July the 1st, they will remove any reference to Rosa Parks' race in all textbooks. White Christian nationalism is embedded in our political system and political parties. Right-wing evangelical Christians have made Jesus a victim of identity theft. Jesus probably recognized himself if we listen to right-wing evangelical Christians. And if you live in Texas, you can't afford to look the other way. If the Deep South is the Bible Belt, Texas, as many have insinuated, is the buckle. And from enslavement to the 88th Texas legislative session that is going on right now, there has been and continues to be a theological defense system that sanctions slavery, black codes, Jim Crow segregation, and still causes politicians and some Christians to refuse to hear prophetic voices. They pass laws, set policies, file bills that are antithetical to God's design and desire for human flourishing. And death-dealing power still exists in the state's churches, throughout the state, in our institutions, and in our political systems. As the current Texas legislative session is underway, we have to pay attention to the bills that have been filed. And we were just there about a week ago, March 12th and March 13th, for a day of action. And while we were down there, we're still hearing about all the bills, such as stripping away voting rights, as if the last session didn't do enough of that. They're further placing this fragile experiment of democracy in jeopardy. The LGBTQIA plus community continues to remain under attack, especially for our young people. Maternal health care needs attention to disrupt a health care system that has proven deadly for mothers, particularly black mothers, who have a maternal mortality and morbidity rate 3 times the rate of our counterparts. And the ongoing misinformation and disinformation around critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bills designed to ban books, erase black history, and in other cases, engage in revisionist history. There is an assault on our fundamental human rights. And it seems as though acts of evil prevail all around us, especially by those who claim to be Christian. As I talk to many of the organizers, the advocates, the paid lobbyists, and those who've been a part of legislative sessions for well over 2 decades, looked to me and told me they think this is the worst Texas legislator has ever been, and that they're scared and that they are nervous, and that more of us, surely plenty of churches, organizations are going down to Austin, lifting voice, being strong advocates, but they were calling for more of us, people of faith, of goodwill, to be involved, to stand on our moral authority and call evil evil, and offer an alternative vision for justice, peace, love, and liberation. Our moral values ought to be transformative and not death-dealing. And looking around, Dr. Marvin McNichol's question remains relevant. Where have all the prophets gone? We need more voices in the public square to call out acts of evil and to demonstrate a life-giving version of Christianity. This is what we are faced with. This is what we are up against as religious leaders, spiritual leaders, seminarians, professors, leaders, and laity. The prophet reminds us that our public and private lives call us to do justice, love kindness, and walk wisely with God. And I love this about Micah. He's saying this is what your daily life ought to look like. And South African theologian, freedom fighter, Dr. Alan Buzek interprets walking wisely with God this way. He says to walk wisely with God means to walk wherever God is walking in the world. And God is where people are hanging on to hope on a tight rope. God is where people are clinging to life. God is where injustice shows up. And just like the people in Micah's day who were impacted by injustice and inequity and in need, and indeed, I suspect they also looked to the religious leaders and said, I need you to lift me up and hold me down. And I believe people today who are feeling the brunt of physical and structural violence are also looking to many of us as leaders saying, lift me up and hold me down. The same way Micah interceded on behalf of the people in verse 6-8, we are called to do the same. The prophet said we are required to do justice. I don't have to unpack the various levels of justice, but love mercy, walk wisely with God. And how do we do that? Well, we back into justice and loving kindness. We first need to locate where is God walking in the world. When we do that, we will know what justice looks like, where justice is needed, and what it means to love kindness. God is walking everywhere. God is walking at the U.S. and Mexico border. God is walking in the communities in Jackson, Mississippi, and Flint, Michigan, where access to clean water is still an issue. God is walking with the frontline workers that we celebrated so much during the height of the pandemic, but they're still looking for living wages and health care benefits. And God is still down in Austin, Texas, where all of the madness is going on. Where do you see God walking in the world? God's divine justice will link up with your social justice when you go there. And so in this season of Lent, in this season of preparation to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, which is an insurrection against the empire, during this season of Lent, many of us have laid down chocolate, cakes, and cookies, social media, TV, streaming services, particular foods, and the list goes on. But may I suggest that as we lay those things down, we pick up some other things to draw closer to God. Maybe we ought to lift up childhood hunger, lack of access and affordability to maternal care, food apartheid, environmental racism. Why don't you write an op-ed, use your social media platforms to raise awareness about the issues, engage in advocacy, activism, and action. Join justice movements, use your privilege to change policies and laws. Give money to organizations who are doing the work. Write or visit your elected officials. And when you do that, when you think about it, it is our obligation to fulfill this requirement laid out by the prophet. So when I saw the order of worship on today and I noticed we would be taking communion, and then I saw the communion table with the trays, I was reminded, of course, today we're going to remember one who lifted people up and held people down. And if we're honest, he's still lifting us up and holding us down. Or I'll just speak for myself. He is still lifting me up and holding me down. When people get on my last good nerve, I remember, come unto me, all ye who are weary and carrying heavy burdens. Take upon my yoke because it's easy and my burden is light, and you will find rest for your soul. He continues to lift me up and hold me down. Oh, when life starts lifing, I remember that you will have trials and tribulations, and you will face persecution, but take courage, have courage. I have conquered the world. The prophet said we must fulfill the requirement to do justice, love mercy, and walk wisely with our God. God bless you.